Cornel West had an interview with Anderson Cooper, and we're going to go through part of this, and then also we're going to talk about the statement that has come from James Carville. I call him the Crypt Keeper, out there smearing Cornel West and Jill Stein, doing what he does, just like he did with Bernie Sanders. But let's get started with this clip here. Shout out to K-Steady QB for doing the damn thing. Cornel West interview with Anderson Cooper.
I want to ask you, Senator Manchin up in New Hampshire tonight, he seems to be testing the waters there. He says the parties are too far to the left and to the right. What do you think of his politics?
Well, I just read the pamphlet Common Sense, and my God, they had the audacity to rename that after the great Thomas Paine's revolutionary pamphlet of January 10th, 1976, that was critical of all forms of hierarchy in the name of the dignity of those fly stone called everyday people. I don't think that the No Labels Party, with their hundreds of $million flowing already, are fundamentally focused on what I'm concerned about, which is the plight of poor and working people trying to come to terms with the cop cities. Why do the critiques of the cop cities trying to come to terms with striking workers, be they in Hollywood, be they in Amazon, be they at UPS, coming to terms with the echo side, with the fossil fuel companies, steel, corporate greed running out of control. We're at a moment now, my brother, where if we don't come to terms with this massive callousness and indifference to the plight of poor and working people, we're going to lose everything. The planet, democracy, qualitative relations with each other. That's how life and death, like our situation is, my brother. Very much so.
Right. So this is a good point. He talked about Joe Manchin and Anderson Cooper. They're here talking about, their concern is worry about political parties. They're worried about where these political parties are. Meanwhile, Cornel West is like, no, we need to be focused on what's happening with working class people in this country. Do you see how their needs are different? Do you see how their priorities are different? Look at what Dr. West is focusing on, and look at what Anderson Cooper and Joe Manchin are focusing on. None of these parties really mean anything if people can't eat. None of these parties mean anything if people don't have a roof over their head. They don't have a place to sleep at night. None of these parties matter if people are suffering and struggling in this country. And yeah, their priorities are misplaced. Who cares about your corporate party and all the donations that you get from corporations? Joe Manchin belongs to the coal companies. So of course he's not going to want to be a part of something that's too far to the left or too far to the right. He's corporate, he's establishment, and that's what helps his best interest. And also that's what helps Anderson Cooper's best interest too. Because let's keep it real. Anderson Cooper is a Vanderbilt. Okay? Vanderbilt, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Anderson Cooper don't know what it's like to be working class. You think Anderson Cooper ever had to work 2 jobs? You think he ever had to worry about, am I going to be able to pay this light bill this month? You think Anderson Cooper had to worry about, well, damn, I don't have money to get my car fixed. Guess I got to try to find a way to get on the bus. No. A lot of these commentators that you see on these platforms, on the mainstream media platforms, a lot of these people come from wealth and privilege. Okay. So he already had an in.
The concern, certainly. I mean, you've been asked this question a million times from a lot of Democrats and Republicans against Trump, that a third-party candidate like yourself could siphon votes away from President Biden. David Axelrod recently tweeted saying in 2016, the Green Party played an outside role in the tipping the election to Donald Trump. Now with Cornel West as their likely nominee, they could easily do it again. Risky business. Now, I know you said you don't believe Jill Stein made that big a difference in the vote count in 2016. In Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, her votes did exceed Trump's margin over Clinton. So how do you answer that critique that you will be siphoning votes away and potentially leading to a Trump victory?
Let's pause here for a second because I want to point something out. I want to show you how sneaky they are. 2016 election results. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. So they have Trump, Clinton, and Stein, right? Okay. You know who they don't have listed here? Gary Johnson. Why don't they have Gary Johnson's name there? Gary Johnson did pretty well. Actually, historically, Gary Johnson's race was a historical victory for the Libertarian Party. Or maybe not victory, but a historical success for the Libertarian Party. Did you know that? Did you guys know that Gary Johnson's race in 2016 was that freaking significant because of how well he did? Notice they don't put him up there. Why don't they put him up there? Because they know then they would have to make the same argument they have against Jill Stein. Then they would have to say, well, you know, those Gary Johnson voters, and they can't do that because here's the reality. No Jill Stein, no Gary Johnson. Those people don't come out for the Democrat and Republican candidates. They continue to make this claim. This claim is false. Those voters, the third party voters, they stay home if there is no third party for them to vote for. Now, people bring up, what about Howie Hawkins? He didn't have that turnout. Howie Hawkins was a poor candidate. That's why he didn't have that turnout. Not people weren't enthused after Jill Stein. You think people were enthused to come out and support Russiagate or Howie Hawkins? Give me a break. But you see how they leave that information out. That's important for people to understand.
Well, part of it is that nearly 40% of our precious citizens every 2 and 4 years decide not to vote at all. And we know that the so-called spoilers, which is a category you can imagine I don't accept at all, over 2/3 of those who vote, it could be a Gary Johnson, a Sister Jill Stein, Brother Ralph Nader, whoever, people say they would never vote for the two parties.
Yep.
And I can understand those two parties become too corrupt, their politicians are too conformist.
By the way, you would never hear this on CNN. If it wasn't Cornel West that was running for president and it was someone that was not well known, you would have never heard that. This interview would have never happened. Okay? This interview would have never happened. That's why it's significant to have someone who has a big name. Let me continue here.
Too many of the politicians themselves are just cowardly, will just say anything. What about truth? What about justice? Truth and justice bigger than all of us, bigger than every party, every race, every person. If you're concerned about truth and justice, then you can't be cowardly, complacent, or conformist, and especially if you look at the world through the lens of those who are incarcerated, those who are in ghettos and hoods and barrios. Brother David Axelrod, he looks at the world through the lens of the establishment. Well, of course, from the lens of the establishment, he's concerned about reproducing the establishment. My God, my God. There's no doubt about that. In the 1850s, both parties supported slavery.
But I think he's probably
with
more,
the Labor Party.
I think he seems more, though, I mean, you know David Axelrod, he seems more interested in preventing former President Trump from getting reelected, more than, I'd say, recreating the establishment.
Yes.
No?
He also is very interested in making sure that you guys don't get universal health care either. David Axelrod is another one who was heavily against giving everybody health care in this country. And to Anderson Cooper's weak point, when he says he's more concerned that people might get Trump again, well, then you should be having this interview with Joe Biden, Anderson Cooper, and ask him why he's doing so poorly. Instead of blaming people who are running against Joe Biden, Anderson Cooper should be asking Joe Biden why he's doing so poorly, why his poll numbers are the way that they are. This idea that we're not supposed to sit up here and point fingers and blame Joe Biden and hold Joe Biden accountable because he is the incumbent and because we might get Trump is bullshit. And I'm pretty much tired of it. I don't care. I don't care how long he's been a politician. I don't care how long he's been in office. He has not done a good job. And so instead of, pointing fingers at Cornel West and Anderson Cooper, basically what he's really saying is, why don't you just step aside and just let Joe Biden have this? That's basically what Anderson Cooper is saying.
Well, no, I'm talking about the Democratic Party establishment, though, brother.
Okay.
The Axelrod is, you see what I mean? You would agree with, he's very much part of the Democratic Party establishment.
Well, his interest. Anyway, I don't want to speak for him, but you criticize
absolutely.
You criticized President Biden, saying recently that he contributed, in your words, I'm quoting, contributed to a crime against humanity when he became the architect of the mass incarceration regime in the 1990s. You're referring to the 1994 Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act that then Senator Biden sponsored. You also said it's, quote, very clear that his cognitive powers are in decline. You have had a remarkable career. You've championed those whose voices have been silenced all your life. We've had you on the program a ton of times talking about that. You've never run a large bureaucracy or had any major governmental leadership role. Isn't that important to actually governing as president?
Apparently not, because look, here's the thing. We have someone, let me tell you what Anderson Cooper just did here. Let me show you how he's sneaky. He just mentioned to you the crime bill, which Joe Biden co-wrote. He said sponsored. You see that? Joe Biden co-wrote the crime bill with racist Strom Thurmond. He leaves that part out. He mentioned all those things that Cornel West has issue with. And then Anderson Cooper goes on to say, don't you think the person in power should be someone that has experience leading government? So what Anderson Cooper is telling you, and listen to this, ladies and gentlemen, what Anderson Cooper is telling you is basically this. Listen, I understand that Joe Biden wrote that bill which targeted Black men and Black families and took Black fathers out their homes, but you need to let him go ahead and have this anyway because he has experience in government. So Anderson Cooper is basically saying F you to African Americans in this country. And I hope people wake up and see that. I hope people really wake up and see what he's really saying underneath. That covert, sneaky-ish. These are the things we really need to pay attention to. Anderson Cooper is the white moderate. He's the white moderate that MLK is talking about. He's privileged. He comes from wealth. He's very comfortable. And even at the end of the day, if that means Anderson Cooper got to tell you, hey, Black people, just settle for this right now. He's going to tell you that, but he's not going to say it in those words. Pay attention to that.
Oh, absolutely. I'd have to bring in people who are experienced, but the important thing is your vision and the lens through which you view the world. Policy is something that can be worked out in light of vision. If your vision is one of militarism abroad, then you're going to be preoccupied with wars and militaristic adventures. We've known Biden's got a long history. I don't think he's actually seen a war that he hadn't supported. I think the invasion and occupation of Iraq was a crime against humanity. How many precious hundreds of thousands of Iraqis were killed based on a lie? Well, Biden was running interference in that regard. I think mass incarceration.
Okay, let's go on here because they're getting into the war in Iraq and mass incarceration and all that jazz.
In the United States, in the last 40 years, is a crime against humanity. I've taught in prisons for 41 years. I've stayed in contact with the rich humanity of my brothers and sisters who have been incarcerated. And many have done things they shouldn't have done. And many are there because they're innocent. But the important thing is, they are sites of barbarity. We ought to be ashamed to live in a country when you look at the conditions of our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated. And it's not just the 1994 crime bill. You can go back to the Biden-Thurstrom. He was a Strom Thurstrom bills of 84 and 86 and 91 and then 94. You see what I mean? So it's just a matter of trying to be truthful. I'm not trying to trash Brother Biden. I really not. I'm trying to make him accountable for his actions in light of how the wretched of the earth are treated in this nation and around the world. And that's true for any politician, be it Obama, Biden, Clinton, Bush, Trump. All of them have to be measured by the same standard of truth and justice.
I want to ask you about the war in Ukraine because I saw.
See, no, he got to pivot to another question now. But no, I told you there were multiple crime bills that Joe Biden wrote.
You tweeted out, you said NATO is an expanding instrument of U.S. global power that provoked Russia into a criminal invasion and occupation of Ukraine. You said this proxy war between the American empire and the Russian Federation could lead to World War III. We must stop the war and war crimes, including cluster bombs used by all parties, and embark on diplomatic talks that should lead to a just peace. You believe, I mean, how are you going to bring all sides to the table on Ukraine? And do you really believe that NATO provoked Russia into invading Ukraine?
Well, when Russia was
the same way you bring both sides to the table with any other war conflict.
Promised that NATO would not move 1 inch, and then a few years later, you got 13 former Soviet related countries.
But wait a minute. But you're talking about in 1990, there was an agreement signed that NATO would not move into East Germany, but actually nothing was said about further east. And it was, at the very least, it was ambiguous.
That is a damn lie. Anderson Cooper is outright lying.
U.S. You can. There's an argument.
It was formal and informal talks, but I mean, you know, the great George Kennan, who's probably had the finest minds of the establishment when it comes to foreign affairs. He said he doesn't understand why NATO needs to exist any longer because it's defensive. Well, the collapse of the Soviet Empire meant, in fact, you no longer even needed NATO. Europe could come up with its own security.
Okay, sorry, let's go on. Case study has to cut these in smaller clips, guys, because of the Twitter limit for like the 2 minutes and 20 seconds with the Twitter limit. Okay.
But
it doesn't seem like that because the people
an arm of the American empire. That's the challenge.
You don't believe, though, that the people of Ukraine right now need NATO to defend against Russian aggression?
Well, the people of Ukraine right now who are suffering, and I'm in deep solidarity with their suffering, they are being caught between this proxy war between the American empire and the Russian Federation. Federation. Now,
but that's not really true. But Dr. West.
See, notice Anderson Cooper continues to interject here because Anderson Cooper's job, particularly at CNN, is to keep the narrative that Ukraine did absolutely nothing wrong. So he has to continue to interject here. Like, whoa, we can't let that message get out on here. They can't 100% completely ignore Dr. West because he is so popular. A lot of people know him. So they got to bring him on and interview him. But at the same time, they have to find a way to still keep the war narrative that the U.S. government has and the State Department has, that mainstream media has decided to spread, across the country. They have to make sure that they can still maintain that.
I mean, it wasn't early on. I mean, you're far more educated than I am, but early on, it was Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary who wanted to join NATO. Warsaw Pact countries, suddenly free, did not want to be under the yoke of the former Soviet Union any longer, and they are the ones who applied to join NATO. It wasn't the U.S. pushing these countries in an expansion play. It was these countries suddenly free, the people in those countries saying, we want to be in the EU. NATO is the fastest way. It's a kind of a stepping stone in the EU. We want that. We want to turn to the West. No, would you?
I'm pretty sure the U.S. had a hand in that. I'm pretty sure those countries just didn't wake up one day and say, hey, I want to be part of this too. I'm pretty sure there were some talks. And I'm pretty sure those talks were instigated by the U.S. Get out of here, Anderson. Anderson Cooper has traveled to all these different countries over the years. So when I was in high school, we actually had this program we used to watch in homeroom called Channel 1. And on Channel 1 was Lisa Ling. And every now and then Anderson Cooper would be a part of it and would pop up, and he would be out investigative in the field somewhere. He's in the Middle East, he's in Europe, he's over here, he's over there. And I remember I used to think that Anderson Cooper, when I was going into broadcast journalism, I used to think that Anderson Cooper was, wow, that's someone to aspire to be like in broadcast journalism. And then I got older and I learned more and I started to see more, and I realized this guy is just a freaking puppet. Yikes.
You have denied Hungary, Czechoslovakia, the choice?
Well, I mean, one, I would have followed George Kennan. I would have abolished NATO right after the collapse of the Soviet Empire, and I would have tried to welcome Russia into the nation, the community of nations, rather than trying to push them against the wall. We know that their system of repression and domination is one in which they're going to feel as if their backs are against the wall. And I think you would probably agree that if Russia or China had missiles in Canada or Mexico targeting Washington, D.C., U.S. government would blow them to smithereens. That's how empires behave. You've read the history. I know the history. We're critical of imperial activity, no matter who it is, American, Russian, and what have you. But America's the most powerful empire in the world, in the history of the world, my brother. And it seems to me, if we can't dismantle that empire in order to empower poor and working people here and abroad, we're going to lose our democracy. It's almost like Rome, it's Cato the Younger and Cicero against Julius Caesar.
Right, but
what happens when your empire begins to take over your democratic possibilities?
But Anderson Cooper doesn't want to talk about working class people. Anderson Cooper doesn't care about working class people. He doesn't care about the homelessness issue. He don't care about any of these things because Anderson Cooper has been privileged and wealthy his entire life. He doesn't care about anything like that. He's fine with the U.S. empire. He's fine with the U.S. government, intervening in other countries. That's more work for him, especially when he was an investigative journalist. That helped out his career. That's how he gets to sit in that seat he's in right now. I did my work out in the field. I traveled to all these countries. My turn for that anchor spot. And he probably got that investigative reporter job because he was a Vanderbilt. So let's keep it real. There have been doors and opportunities that have been open for Anderson Cooper that will never be open for us because of who we are. Because we don't have that name or the recognition. So he don't care about working class people. This is why he didn't really care about Medicare for all. None of these policies that people like Cornel West, even Marianne and Bernie Sanders, these policies that they ran on that would help working class people, those things just go right over Anderson Cooper's head because he doesn't understand it because he's never had to live it. And that's something that needs to be pointed out. And most of those commentators that get on these spots, similar situations, they had an in.
Spoke to the foreign minister of Ukraine. We're going to have that interview.
And we'll go to the next clip here. Sorry. And there's just one more clip after this one I want to get to for this conversation.
Later on, I think if you said to him, you're standing with the people of Ukraine in solidarity, and you're saying that they are just victims in this proxy war, he would say, you're out of your mind.
You don't think the civilians aren't victims? You don't think the people in Ukraine aren't victims? They don't have anything to do with this. They didn't sign up for this war.
I mean, they are thankful. They are thankful for NATO. They are thankful for the U.S. You can call it the American empire, but I mean, they are thankful for all these countries rallying to their side. I mean, I've been there. You've probably been there as well. I mean, it's a horrible. It's an invasion. I mean, of killing civilians in cities.
Oh no, it is a criminal invasion. I'm not denying it's a criminal invasion, but what I'm saying is, you go back to the men's talks. You go back to March, 1 month after the war began, my brother. I'm calling for ceasefire. I don't want to see
you
the
can call it for ceasefire. Vladimir Putin isn't really listening to it. You
see how he cut him off when he said the word ceasefire? See, they don't want that message to get out. They don't want the message to get out. We need to have negotiations. We need to call for peace. We need to call for ceasefire. This is why you don't see people like Medea Benjamin on there. They don't want that message to get out. So let me go ahead and interrupt him now that he let him say all that other stuff. But as soon as you say something like ceasefire, let me go ahead and interrupt him. Sorry, I cut off.
So you can call it for ceasefire. Vladimir Putin isn't really listening to what you say or I say or anybody says. He's doing what he wants to do, just like he slaughtered. I mean, you saw what he did to Grozny. You saw what he did to Grozny in the.
They called for negotiations earlier on. They called for negotiations earlier on. This is not to say that Russia is innocent, but Anderson Cooper is purposely leaving that information out.
90s, I mean, he flattened that city. Civilians were trapped in that city. No, the world didn't come to the rescue of Grozny. He did exactly what he wanted to do. I mean, unchecked, he will slaughter people.
Well,
you mean the same way our government has done to other countries? Who's checking the U.S. government? Who was checking the U.S. government when they were giving arms to Saudi Arabia so that Saudi Arabia could slaughter people in Yemen? Who was checking the U.S. government? Who's checking the U.S. government when they dropped drones on people in Somalia? Who was checking the U.S. government when they sent Marines to Haiti to take over their businesses and their banking? Who was checking the U.S. government? You see, this is the problem. Nobody checks the U.S. government. Think about it. This idea that, well, he said he just wants to do whatever he wants to do. Haven't we been doing the same damn thing? Hasn't the U.S. government been doing whatever the fuck they want to do when it comes to other countries for centuries? Get out of here, Anderson. Get out of here.
I mean, unchecked, he will slaughter folk. Unchecked, what we did in Iraq was slaughtering people. Unchecked, what we've done in other places. Unchecked,
but sir,
variety of other empires.
Dr. West, do you really?
Not allowed to say that. Not allowed to talk about what happened to people in Iraq. Those poor kids, the women and children in Iraq, we're not allowed to talk about that. Notice when it comes to the women and the children, they don't care about the women and the children in those countries, though.
They do that though.
No, I understand.
They're wrong. And when they're wrong, you have to pull up. You have to point it out.
I respect you. You know, I love you. But I do think it's inappropriate to compare the Russian bombing of Grozny and what we witnessed there with the war in Iraq. I mean, to say that innocent.
Why? Because of the groups of people that were affected? Because the people being affected right now are European versus the people that were affected in the Middle East? Because of the people, right? You know, there is this lack of sympathy when it comes to people in those Middle Eastern countries. Let's keep it real, guys. Let's keep it real. I don't see Anderson Cooper and all these other commentators crying about what's happening to the poor people in Somalia. I don't see them crying and saying, oh, those poor people in Yemen. They don't care about those people. Those people don't have the right complexion. I said it.
And the innocents are killed. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the horrible things happen.
Half a million Iraqis killed, my brother.
Well,
500,000.
Yeah, listen, I was there. I mean, I was there. I was there.
You were there. He was there and he knows. Anderson Cooper don't care about the Iraqi people. Those people don't matter to Anderson Cooper. Think about that, folks. He was literally there. Yeah, all those people died. I was there. I know. Here he is agreeing with Dr. West that all those people were killed. But he don't really care. He don't give a shit.
The truth. I certainly understand. I also saw a lot of Americans getting killed, and I saw, you know, the horrors of Saddam Hussein. I'm just saying, I don't.
This is not about the American people. See how they tried to bring in, you know, this is colonizer mindset bullshit. This is colonizer mentality. Let's talk about the millions of people that died in Iraq that had nothing to do with this war. Well, you know, there were also Americans that, let me bring in the other people. Let's bring in the Western folk who were also injured and harmed. Think about this, people. American soldiers that joined the military that were deployed to Iraq, right? Those are soldiers, American soldiers deployed there. There's a big difference from the people who just live in that country, who are not soldiers, who lost their lives. Do you see what I'm saying? It to me, let's insert the Western ideology. Don't forget about the West. They always do this shit. Always. Excuse my language today. Sorry.
And I also saw a lot of Americans getting killed, and I saw, you know, the horrors of Saddam Hussein. I'm just saying, I don't think it's accurate to compare the pummeling of a city by Russian artillery with civilians inside, pummeling every single day with the intention.
Didn't we do the same thing? Don't even come back and talk about, let me say something. Don't even come back and talk about the video footage of American soldiers doing what they did to Iraqi citizens. Don't even come back and talk the pictures that were taken. And I'm talking about civilians. I'm not even talking about the soldiers. Let's think about that for a second. And Anderson Cooper's actually going to sit here and pretend like it's not the same. Don't make the comparison. He don't want you to make the comparison, boo, because it's not the right complexion. That's what this is really about. The United States government supports and backs a colonizer mindset that embraces Christianity. They don't support and back people from the Middle East that may embrace Islam. Think about that. You don't have the Christian religion. This is why I say America is a conservative country. If you don't have the Christian religion, you suspect. You have religion, but the God that you choose to worship is not Christ. They looking at you with a side eye. This is the last clip here.
Of just destroying and flattening a city with actions the U.S. took. I mean, I don't know. Look, you know, wars, horrible things happen in wars, and it's horrible.
War, that's absolutely. But I mean, you know, and I know any comparative analysis of levels of barbarity and cruelty is going to lend itself to this ugly algebra of blood that we don't want to get into. But all I'm saying is you can't just jump into a situation where people are being treated barbarically. There's no doubt that Ukrainian people are being treated in a barbaric way. That's that murderous way. There's no doubt about that. But the context is one in which that did not have to be if the expansion of NATO, and NATO is an arm of the American global power network. But what you're saying though in Ukraine is that the Ukrainians, they're just going to have to compromise and give up their land because they're just in the wrong.
That is not what he said. You see this? Also, why can't he straighten his neck? What is this? Is he what is this? His head been to the side the entire interview. Giving me whiplash.
No, I'm not saying that.
Well, you said there have to be hard compromises on all sides. You said there have to be hard compromises. You said there have to be compromises on all sides, and you know compromise for Ukraine means Crimea. It means whole parts of their east. Is that fair? Well, I mean, I don't know. I want a just peace for my Ukrainian brothers and sisters, and I don't want World War III. I don't want World War III. The way that we're moving now, we got 3,000 advisors. Well, we heard that in Vietnam. We're on the way to possible nuclear exchange. How ugly. Here we got Trump pushing us toward the second civil war at home. You got Biden pushing us toward a third world war abroad. We need an alternative. That's what this campaign's probably about, my brother. Dr. West, I appreciate your time tonight, as always. No, indeed. Love you. Even when we disagree. Love you, man. You take care.
I don't love him. Dr. West, you nice because I don't. And I'm going to need for him to straighten his neck because that is really bothering me. But if you could imagine, they also brought back the Crypt Keeper. Now, you know this guy, anytime there's some type of uprising from the left or any type of shift away from center or center right, they always go back and reach into the crypt and pull out the Crypt Keeper and ask this guy what he thinks the American people should do. And I'm talking about James. So James decides to smear Cornel West and Jill Stein. Listen to this.
You hear Dr. West? What is your reaction to what he had to say? Do you think he rejects the term spoiler candidate. Do you think he could be?
Well, first of all, he's obviously an accomplished scholar, academic. He seems to be a very charming man. And he's also a minister to the threat of the continued constitutional order in the United States. And if I say that.
What is the constitutional order in the United States? What do you mean? What do you mean constitutional order? What is this? Some secret society? Listen to the way he talks. Why are we still taking advice from people who are stuck in the past? Why are we still taking advice from people who don't want anything to change? They don't want any kind of movement. They want everything to sit exactly where it is. Why are we taking their advice? Every time I turn around, when somebody that's running progressive style or challenging the status quo, they go and reach in their back pocket, CNN and MSNBC, they reach in their back pocket and they pull out the Crypt Keeper. Every time I turn around, this man's face popping back up on the screen as if he's still relevant. Why can't you just retire and just keep it as it is? Jesus.
Because look what Ralph Nader was directly responsible for the election of George W. Bush, which brought about this horrific Iraq war and this horrific.
Ralph Nader was not responsible for George W. Bush. This is ridiculous. George W. Bush. Do we all remember what happened during that election? Stop blaming Ralph Nader. Stop blaming Ralph Nader. Come on. He was a Bush. Jesus Christ. I can't with this man.
Economic downturn we had, among other things. Jill Stein, who's his campaign manager, is almost certainly an agent of the Russian government. If you don't believe me, somebody at home, Google photo, General Flynn, Vladimir Putin, Jill Stein.
First of all, this was already debunked. In fact, I sent this to Jill. I'm going to tell you what she said. Hold on. I sent this clip to Jill. This guy is such a God. She said, oh, hold on. Jill said a 3-year investigation by the Senate Intelligence Committee laid that slander to rest. Guess he didn't read it. You see how he's still here spewing lies? This guy is horrible. Absolutely horrible.
Google photo, General Flynn, Vladimir Putin, Jill Stein. She was.
So you're guilty if you took a picture with somebody. Okay. Donald Trump has taken pictures with Vladimir Putin. Barack Obama has taken pictures with Vladimir Putin. Is Barack Obama also a Russian asset? No, because you're not going to say that about Barack Obama because he fits your bill. He's status quo. He's exactly what you want him to be. I don't understand how people can listen to this and not understand that there is something seriously wrong with our country. The way that they just smear people, they don't want you to have a true democracy in this country. They're telling you, you better pick one party or the other party, and that's it. And that's the only choice that you should have. Let me let Crypt Keeper finish.
Hosted by the Russians prior to her running in 2016. So, you know, people are going to have to decide, do we want to continue under our Constitution? Because Donald Trump is telling us that very clearly, is bragging about the fact that he doesn't want to live under the Constitution anymore. And it's very clear that the only thing that Dr. West's candidacy can do is help elect Donald Trump.
Does the Constitution, let's talk about the Constitution. Did the Constitution prevent the overturn of Roe v. Wade? Does the Constitution prevent unarmed Black people from being killed by the police and the police having no accountability? What exactly does the Constitution do for you today? You know, it's just, these people live in the past, you know? I don't know. Maybe he was alive during the Constitution. I don't know. He Crypt Keeper. But all I'm saying is like, nobody thinking about this mess, man. You're talking about a document that was written when none of us were alive to begin with anyway. A document that was written not for people like me, a document that was written for white men, particularly those who own property. And that's what you want to focus on in 2023? That's where you are now? Give me a break.
It's nothing. I don't think any of that's inarguable, nor is it arguable that Jill Stein had deep relationships with the Russian government.
So let me ask you, because
this guy is such a liar. Do you see this? Nobody pushes back. Does Anderson Cooper push back here? No, he doesn't, because that fits his narrative. Jesus Christ.
you know the argument that Ralph Nader put forward, you know the argument that Jill Stein has put forward, Dr. West mentioned it again tonight, that a lot of those people who voted for Jill Stein or Ralph Nader would not have voted for any of the mainstream candidates, and therefore they did not suck away votes from Hillary Clinton or would not hurt votes from Biden here.
Well, how could I argue with that? I'm sure that some of it's true, some of it's not true.
I mean,
all of it's true. All of it is true. Anderson Cooper won't interview those people, though. Do you see Anderson Cooper out in the street with a microphone asking people who supported Jill Stein? Do you see them interviewing as many times as they want to do these panels of Democrat voters or Republican voters? Do you see them doing a panel on CNN of people who supported Jill Stein or people who supported Gary Johnson? No, you don't. Because they don't really want to hear what you think. And if you ever see that, it's going to be people that they handpicked, and 9 times out of 10, those motherfuckers are liars anyway. They don't want you to hear it.
There's no way to know whether somebody could tell a pollster, oh no, of course I wouldn't vote for any other candidate, but who knows how people would vote.
Yeah.
There is a way to know. And if you're a so-called journalist like you say you are, the way to know is to interview those people. That's how you know. So miss me with the there is no way to know BS.
I can't disprove that, nor what I want to. But what I do know, there was Russian help that were telling black voters in Detroit to vote at the wrong place or to vote on Wednesday and not Tuesday. I do know.
He doesn't think black people in Detroit are smart enough to know when election day is. Like what? I don't know how people fall for this. And I gotta say, I gotta keep it real. Let me play this last clip because there's another part of this. I gotta keep it real. Let me play this first and I'll tell you what I gotta say about the bourgeoisie.
I do know that Jill Stein was in Moscow, was sitting with General Michael Flint, with Vladimir Putin, was on Russian TV from Red Square.
A lot of people were on RT. So what? I know people who just vacation. So now it's bad that you even went to Moscow. Don't you know that's a tourist attraction? What the hell? Let's go back and check and see who all else was on RT.
Attacking the United States itself, and I do know, I'm told that's his campaign manager, and it's the same outfit that cost us the election in 2000, could have very well cost us the election in 2016.
What cost you, first of all, who's us? Notice how he says us. He's talking about the Democratic Party. What cost you the election in 2016 is the fact that the Democratic Party chose the losing candidate to be the nominee. We went over this. We went over the polls. At one point, how Bernie was beating Hillary Clinton and the DNC selected Hillary Clinton, who was actually the losing candidate. We went over all this. That's why you lost. Jesus Christ. I can't.
And I'm just sitting here with a clear present warning. Don't fall for this. Do not fall for this. Only bad can come about this.
And no bad has come from you voting for the Democratic Party. No bad has come from you voting for the Democratic Party. What has changed in your life? What has progressed in your life?
What about Joe Manchin? Do you think he actually is serious?
I hope not. And they keep saying that no labels, if they think it's going to help Trump, they won't run. Well, I can tell you right now, it's going to help Trump. No, there's not a single that I know would argue otherwise. And plus,
I don't think he realizes that this time around, people aren't as afraid of Donald Trump becoming president as they were the first time. I don't think he realizes that. This whole thing is going to help Trump. It's going to help Trump. Trump is seriously beating Ron DeSantis in the polls. He just gained 35 points against Ron DeSantis in the recent poll that I shared last night. Like, they really think that this is, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think people are that fearful this time around. I really don't, because now we've had Biden.
Their argument is just flatly ridiculous on his face that Trump and Biden represent two extremes. I mean, Trump is obviously one of the most extreme people in the United States. Biden is certainly not an extreme man. You may say he's more liberal than I would like, but to equate the two of it.
More liberal than he would like. You see that? That's how the Democratic Party has moved. More liberal than he would like. Democratic Party is right wing.
Is absurd, but I think that when they get closer to this decision, at least I hope that they see that the only thing that they can do is help elect Trump. And it's a shame, but President Biden, the Democrats are being caught by the leftists on one side, and I don't know what you'd call the no labels people, but kind of caught between. And somebody better think about the good of the future of the United States, because that's literally what's at stake here.
James Carville, thank you.
If he was worried about the good of the future of the United States, we wouldn't be supporting two corporate parties in the first damn place. James thinking about what's good for his pocket. Majority of Americans don't even vote. There's a reason for that. Isn't that terrible? You see what they're doing? I told you every time, let's go back and pull out the Crypt Keeper. Thank you for the super chat, Susan. These upper financial people are completely insulting and biased to their interests and nobody else. Thank you for the super sticker, dogs in slow motion. That's a cute name. A puppy on the beach. Dave says Cornel West is trying to destroy my stock portfolio. Thank you for the super chat, Janice. Anderson Cooper telling us Iraqis can find sympathy in the dictionary between shh and syphilis. Dude is evil. Greg says, so it's okay to have pictures with Netanyahu, but not Putin. Ouch. That's a good point. Thank you for the super chat, Janice. Haven't seen a panel since 2016 when they asked us who was planning to vote third party, and more than half the voters raised their hands. And Nelson says they are well off, so they don't want anything to change and don't care about those struggling because it doesn't affect them. Thank you so much, Nelson.